I've just been talking to you about how tough the market is. It is difficult trading out now, but we've got Simon from RTB House, who's going to walk us through a couple of slides of what those guys are seeing in the market from their perspective. And then, Simon, we're going to have a quick chat as well. Would you do us the honor first, though, Simon, of please introducing yourself, who you are and who RTB are, and then jump straight into your slides.
Thanks, Matt. Lovely to be here again. So it's great to be with you all. So I'm Simon. I'm the country manager for RTB House. RTB House, we're a marketing technology company. We help retailers essentially find and then convert shoppers on the internet. How we do this? We do this through activating first-party data, putting together great-looking creatives that drives results, and underpinning all of that, we have our technology, which is deep learning artificial intelligence. So a bit more on that. But for today's purposes, what we wanted to share with you was just a few of the trends that we're seeing, which I think will probably build on what Matt said already. So we're going to take a quick look at what's happening, particularly from a consumer point of view. So if we look at this slide here, what I'm going to talk you through is some data that's our internal RTB House data. And what you're looking at in front of you on the screen is days from Payday and conversion data. So we do work with a lot of retailers. We also work with a lot of other industries as well. So a good example there would be travel. So what we're looking at here is the cross-industry conversions and when they took place in relation to Payday. Payday for a lot of companies is usually the end of the month, so say something like the 28th of every month. And we're starting back in 21. And what you can see here in 21 is that blue line. And you can see that roughly 5 days before Payday, you start to get a peak in terms of conversions. So the hypothesis here is people know they're going to get paid. It's sort of the 23rd of the month. They now know what they're going to go out and buy. And there's a little bit of a lift in terms of the amount of conversions that's happened on that particular date. But the story's changed as we've gone through the pandemic and exited it as well. So when we look at 2022, what you're going to start to see on the next slide is how that line starts to shift. So sometimes it's hard to remember 2022, what was going on that moment there, but you can still see there's not a dramatic shift, should we say, in terms of the fluctuations of the heights or peaks of the troughs. And actually, again, sort of roughly about 5 days before Payday, people are starting to be a bit more active in terms of the number of conversions that we see. But then when you start fast forwarding to 2023, you start to get a slightly different pattern emerging, and we're beginning to get slightly closer to more conversions happening around Payday. And when you look at 2024, what you're going to see on the next slide is there's a dramatic shift. So here's what we see, and this is very real data from the first 2 months of the year as well. And what we're seeing here is there's a huge shift now in terms of when we're seeing the volume of conversions coming through. So what you can see is it's in those first 5 days post-Payday. So this post-Payday peak is what we're seeing as a huge shift. And again, we work with lots of retailers, lots of other industries, and this is the story that's coming out. So again, hypothesis here is people waiting to get paid, and then actually when they are getting paid, it's a flurry of activity. So not only is the timing changed in terms of when they're actually making the purchase, but you can see that peak as well. It's much more pronounced than it was back in 2021. So what can we do with this data? So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but the trend here you can see is it's much more pronounced. And it's not just this trend. If we move on to the next slide, that's happening in retail. It's happening everywhere. So with travel, out of sector, one of the things I wanted to signal is that travel, when we think about peak, used to be very pronounced in the middle of the year and the end of the year. So you used to have June, July, December, January, Feb as travel peaks. Since 22, travel's just been accelerating in terms of the amount of conversions every month. What's interesting is this year, it's the first year when the United Nations tourism industry body has come out and said that tourism levels will be 2% above 2019 levels. Now that's astonishing because no travel companies wanted to compare their success year on year pre-pandemic because it's just too painful, because it's just so hard. But we're now seeing massive shifts. And I'm mentioning this because travel's had its first real peak again in the first part of this year. And I mention it because we're seeing lots of holidays getting booked. And if you've got seasonal lines or seasonal wear, which is more traditionally sold in those summer months or for summer holidays, it feels like now is the time to be promoting it because there's a real shift around it. But let's go back into retail. So on the next slide, what I want to show you is actually what's happening in the home and garden category. So we've just seen from Matt some interesting data around this. Again, what you can see is that pronounced data on the right-hand side. So what we're seeing is post-payday, there's a real peak in terms of the number of conversions going on and actually the timing of those conversions. So what's the takeaway? What can we practically do? And what are our clients asking of us? This is when we work very, very closely with them. And the conversations we'll have will be somewhere along the lines of the following. Dependent on what their objectives are for the month, we might be talking about growing market share or gaining overall sales revenues. So what I mean by that is, if in the first part of the month, actually what the retailer has been concentrating on is efficiency, and actually they've got a certain return on ad spend investment they want to work towards, what we might find is as they come towards that next payday peak and they want to grow overall revenues, and actually the efficiency has been very good, so they want to gain market share and overall sales, we'll work with them to then say, this is what we could be looking at in terms of more conversions for you, more sales for you over this particular period. So the key takeaway from this data is, I think you have to work very closely with your partners who you're working with to make sure that actually you're maximizing the opportunity for those weekly sales calls to make sure you take advantage of what's happening in the market right now. So that's the big takeaway from this. You need to be very tightly on top of how you can get the most from your partners and how they can help drive you conversions. So that's a bit of data. So what else can you do? So there's a couple of things that we think are coming out loud and clear right now. So the first piece is promotion periods. I'm not sure how that always lands with a retail audience, but we do find that a lot of our clients are experimenting with these. They're moving outside of the usual promotional periods and they're being bold with it. So they're coming out and making different offers. Now, what goes alongside with that is they're experimenting a lot with creatives. And so we really encourage this. There's lots of different creatives you can use, and they're being encouraged to test this multiple times. So what we find is there's a lot of creative refreshes going on right now, going all the way through the month of February. There's a lot that goes on with that, because with creative refreshes, you need to make sure not only is it on brand, but it's also delivering the different campaign goals you might be wanting to deliver. So again, the call out there is work very closely with your partner to make sure the creatives are fresh, but also they're being delivered in the way you want them to be delivered to. So alongside the promotional, those promo periods, we're talking a lot about personalized content. So again, when we use our deep learning, so that most advanced part of artificial intelligence, we use that to pick up how your particular customers or potential customers are navigating your app or your website. And then what we do is we understand their sorts of patterns of behavior, how often they come, the sorts of content they like to look at, how long they might dwell on the page, the times between interactions, lots of different data points. And then what we'll do is when we reach out to them with the advertising, we'll make sure it's entirely personalized to them. But the creative piece is one of the ones I really want you to take away today, because I feel this is really important. There's lots of different creators that can be built. And what we're finding again right now is, particularly in relation to what we just looked at in that sort of payday data, that there'll be a blend towards performance creators, but also some more brand-led creatives. And what you can see from left to right here is sometimes it's more detail orientated. It might be about offers. It might be about particular products. It might be about actually scrolling through on a carousel to get the best out of it. Or it could be some more halo items and even videos as well. And again, some more examples on the next slide. And all I'm looking to call out here is there's a lot that we can do creatively. And one of the things that sometimes can be overlooked is how best to show up in front of your consumer. So again, in terms of recency bias, this year we're seeing many more clients thinking about testing their creatives and then working out actually how to get the most from them. And when we think about personalization, I think it's interesting. IMRG, I think yourselves, you came out with Adobe the back end of last year saying that actually on average 76% of consumers prefer personalized creators, personalization in their experience. And actually as a result of that, they're much more inclined to purchase, repurchase, and also recommend as well. And that's entirely in line with McKinsey's path to purchase studies as well, which has been rolling out for the last couple of years. So these are the things that you can do. So it's promotional periods, be thinking about what you want to test and learn. Personalized content, how can you make the most of that with your partners? And then the technology that underpins it all, how can you make sure you're taking advantage of it and be really closely aligned to the partners that you work with? So there's a couple of quick slides. If there's any data you've seen on that actually you'd like to know more about that I haven't gone into now, then please do reach out to us directly through the team here, obviously at IMRG. I'm fairly easy to find on LinkedIn if you'd rather do that. So please ask for more if you find that useful.
Marvelous, nice stuff. Thank you for that. When you say you're fairly easy to find on LinkedIn, is that the unusual surname?
It is. It is, yes. Sorry, good man. It's a Cornish surname. It's very old. It's very English. I don't think there's many of us on LinkedIn, so I'm fairly simple to find.
I like it. I have two quick questions for you then.
Brilliant.
So we were showing February performance earlier, and you were mentioning kind of some of the historical stuff that you guys are seeing as well. What have you picked up from February, kind of the most recent information? Any interesting observations from your side of things?
Yes, so I guess two quick things. So interestingly, actually, we've seen really good return on ad spend for clients who are actually in the electronics and fashion retail space. So I know that sometimes we were looking at some of the data, and overall things are down in terms of headline revenues. We've actually found that there's been pockets of really good growth there. And again, with that, what we're finding, particularly, I've got a particular luxury brand in mind here. Actually, they're doing very well, because they do pay a lot of attention and details to their creatives and the way in which we work with them. So the biggest signal there is there are opportunities to actually get growth in a market like this. I think you just need to work out very closely with your partner when to activate and how to activate.
And you mentioned in your slides there, good old machine learning, the big topic. So what role in your interpretation can AI and machine learning play in increasing conversions? Where do they get involved in increasing conversions?
Good man. I'll try and be as quick as possible. So in terms of artificial intelligence, it's like a broad church. Within that, it goes from automation to machine learning, which you've just referenced. But the most sophisticated and advanced part is deep learning. So that's the part that we use. So companies have this. So Tesla have it, and they use to activate it in their self-driving cars. Alphabet has it. Again, they'll do it within Waymo, and equally they execute it in DeepMind to solve life science problems. We put it into the marketing stack. The key takeaway here, though, is that when you use deep learning, the actual way in which it works, the technology can think for itself. It can actually understand the patterns of behavior, make connections that we as humans can't make. And so it's not defined by any pre-based rules. And what that means is when it comes to changes in consumer behavior, the deep learning is going to pick up on that far more quickly than anything else. And as a consequence, can be much better in terms of personalized recommendations and also the opportunity to find that audience. So it's a really good way to make sure that when you're thinking about your ad investment, you're making the most of it, because the buying is so intelligent and precise.
Simon, thank you very much for coming on today's webinar. Always a pleasure whenever you crop up with us. Always good insights. Thank you very much for today.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here.